In this video, we're going to work through an example of finding the exact value of sine of pi over 12 using the half angle formula. And the question in the homework also asks us to find the answer in this form. So we're going to find it in the form 1/2 square root of some number minus the square root of some number. So when we finally get the answer, we might have to do some rearranging to put it in that form to determine what the values are for A and B. Okay, so now the formula for half angle for sine is plus or minus, depending on what quadrant you're in, so we'll have to figure that out. 1 minus cosine of the angle all over 2. So what we're doing is we need to rewrite, if we're going to use half angle formula, we need to write pi over 12 as some other angle divided by 2. Well, if I take pi over 6 and divide by 2, that will give me pi over 12. So I'm going to rewrite pi over 12 as pi over 6 divided by 2. And that way we know that our angle is pi over 6. Now, typically when you do these, you're going to want to rewrite it using an angle that is already on your unit circle so that you have the exact value. And pi over 6 is definitely on our unit circle. So now that we have our angle identified for pi over 6, we want to put the information into our formula. And for just a moment, we're going to ignore the plus or minus. I'm going to put in 1 minus the cosine of our angle, which is pi over 6, divided by 2. Now, to figure out if we're going to use plus or minus, we need to figure out if sine of pi over 2, if sine of pi over 12 is in a quadrant where the y is negative or positive. When we look at our unit circle, pi over 12 would be somewhere in here. Pi over 6 would be here, and half of pi over 6 would be pi over 12. So we're definitely talking about the first quadrant, which means the sine of pi over 12 should be positive. So we're going to keep the positive square root. Okay, now this is the answer, but we're going to do a little bit of rearranging so that we can get it into the form that your homework is asking for. Okay, so cosine of pi over 6, if we look at the unit circle, is the square root of 3 over 2, all over 2. Now, we're going to clear the fractions because we have a complex fraction. We have the square root of 3 over 2 within a whole nother fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by 2 to clear the complex fraction. So if I take 1 times 2, that gives me 2. The square root of 3 over 2 times 2 just leaves me with the square root of 3. And 2 times 2 in the denominator will give me 4. Then the last step is I can take out the 1/4 because the square root of 1/4 is 1/2. I can pull that out in front, and I'm left with 2 minus the square root of 3. So now if you notice, we have it written in the form that the question is asking for, and I can identify what my values are for A and B. A would be 2, and B would be 3. Now, any of these answers here that I'm circling here in red, any of these are the exact value and is the answer. However, the question is asking for in a certain format. So I don't want you to think that those other answers that are circled are incorrect. It's just giving it to you in a different form. So it's like giving you the answer as 4/8 rather than 1/2, or giving it to you as 0.5 rather than 1/2. They're equivalent in value. It's just giving it to you or asking for you in a different form.